Amanda Mongus was a sweet, friendly girl from an early age. She surrounded herself with many friends and was always friendly and sociable. At the same time, she was not overly trusting and remained quite selective in choosing her immediate circle. Amanda was born and lived in the small town of Delta, Agaya State, USA, with a population of 3,000 people. She liked the humanities most of all. She loved children, so even in elementary school she decided to become an educator or teacher. Amanda paid great attention to education because she wanted to ensure financial stability for herself in the future, so she planned to graduate from college and get a full-time job before starting a family. However, the reality turned out to be far from her idealized dreams. The relationship between her parents did not work out, and conflicts constantly arose. Eventually, they decided to get a divorce. When this happened, Amanda was 13 years old, and she chose to stay with her dad. The man quickly remarried a woman named Deborah, and the three of them began to live happily together. Most of all, from her circle of friends, Amanda singled out a guy named James Ramey, whom she had known since kindergarten. The children grew up together, went to the same school, and became inseparable friends. While working part-time in the summer, she was even more than him. James was described as a funny and pleasant young man. Gradually they developed young feelings. The lovers began dating, and it all grew into a more serious relationship. After finishing school, Amanda decided to leave home and live with her boyfriend in James's apartment. As soon as she managed to find a part-time job, she started working because she didn't want to depend on her family. The girl ended up working in the kitchen of a local restaurant, where she worked part-time to combine work with study. Despite the strong feelings, when the girl introduced the guy to her family as her lover, they weren't happy from the very beginning. They all didn't like James. Even the girl's stepmother expressed concerns about this relationship, but Amanda was adamant. She was so in love and decided that the warnings were an exaggeration. She believed that she knew better than others what to do, but the adults looked at the situation more objectively. The young man behaved strangely. As a result, Amanda continued to build a serious relationship despite his young age. After moving in, the guy's behavior changed dramatically for the worse. Gradually, he began to control his girlfriend more and more. He was constantly jealous and reproached her for cheating. All of this reached the point of moral pressure that the heroine of the story experienced. The worst fears of her relatives, which they had warned her about at home, became a reality. Unfortunately, the inexperienced girl initially did not notice what was really happening in her relationship with her boyfriend. Amanda wanted to break off relations with him quite quickly, since he was a very controlling and manipulative person, but she was afraid. James believed that he had the right to manage everything in her life, from her social circle to the clothes she wore every day. As soon as she left the house, even to go to the store, regular calls began. The boyfriend was jealous of her at literally every post. The situation only worsened when Amanda became pregnant. At first, James reacted neutrally to all of this, but his dissatisfaction gradually grew as his beloved gave him less and less attention. She did not want to terminate the pregnancy on his advice and decided to become a mother. Of course, all this required preparation, and she devoted herself entirely to the process. Naturally, this affected the relationship, as the girl began to share the attention that had previously been entirely given to James in preparing for the birth of the baby. The boyfriend continued to insist that he didn't want this child and should get rid of it. However, the heroine of the story refused to follow his demands. On May 21, 2016, a boy was born. By this time, Amanda's relationship with almost all her friends had deteriorated. The situation was made even more difficult because James was present in the hospital. This seriously interfered with Amanda's desire to meet her family. Unfortunately, neither the boyfriend nor the father and stepmother got along. They could not stand each other, so every meeting resulted in quarrels and mutual hassle. It seemed that James was deliberately preventing her from meeting her loved ones. However, this is typical behavior for the manipulator that he was. As a result, her father and stepmother were never able to see their grandson when he was in the hospital for the first time. He met his grandparents when he was already 3 months old. All this time, Amanda could only correspond with them, sending photos of the child through a messenger. Gradually, James became even more harsh and manipulative. Any little thing could infuriate him, and everything would be blown out of proportion. He liked to reduce it all to accusations of infidelity, each time concluding that the child was not his. Such behavior greatly upset Amanda. The girl resisted in every possible way, but she fought not only with James, but also with postpartum depression and hormonal changes that are inevitable for many young mothers. The situation only got worse. It ended with James not only attacking her verbally but also taking a knife and putting it to her throat, threatening to kill her. Even despite this, Amanda continued to believe that she would be able to save the family for the sake of her son. She prepared herself for this, believing that this period of aggression was associated exclusively with the changes that occurred in the young family after the birth of the child. The young mother did not tell her family about this incident, but shared her experiences with several friends. The manipulator had intimidated her so much and ruined her relationships with loved ones to the point where she was simply afraid to turn to them. This often happens in such cases. Even Amanda's friends understood that what was happening in her life was not normal, especially given that she had a child. James's behavior was becoming more dangerous, not just for her but also for her son. Everyone advised her to break up with him, and now Amanda was seriously thinking about it. This decision was not easy for the heroine of the story. She vividly remembered how loving, caring, and gentle James had been at the beginning of their relationship, how they had been friends for many years. She hoped that everything happening now was just temporary, that they all needed to adapt. So, again and again she forgave any insults and even physical violence that he had started resorting to, but all of this could not go on forever. One evening, after another conflict, the young couple decided to go to a bar to have a drink, cool off, and discuss what had happened during this period. Amanda's mother came to look after the baby. The woman expected she would only need to care for him for a couple of hours, but even after 3 hours, neither the daughter nor James had returned home. As it turned out, that evening, James had drunk too much alcohol. Amanda didn't drink, so she got behind the wheel to get home. But after driving 2 blocks, James began to demand that he be allowed into the driver's seat. At first, the girl didn't want to agree to this, but he began to get angry, so she gave in to avoid provoking another conflict. Unfortunately, it turned out to be reckless. Neither of them was wearing a seatbelt, and James, after driving a few hundred meters, crashed into a parked car. The drivers and the passenger hit the steering wheel at speed. James did not receive serious injuries, but Amanda was badly injured. She hit the windshield, which turned out to be broken, and she cut herself. Despite the fact that the young man was clearly at fault for the accident, he immediately began to insult Amanda, blaming her for it. She had absolutely no time for this, as she was trying to stop the bleeding and was generally afraid that she might have sustained serious injuries. But the guy clearly didn't control himself. Instead of calling for medical help, James got more and more agitated, and it escalated from verbal abuse to physical violence. He beat his wounded girlfriend. After this incident, Amanda realized that James did not have any human feelings for her. He was a cruel person from whom she should have stayed away from the very beginning. First of all, the girl wrote a statement to the police and also removed her boyfriend from all contacts. After the accident and the attack, Amanda called her father and asked him to take her home with the child. The Manga's family was reunited again. The girl received a restraining order against James and believed that she and her son were finally safe. James really quieted down for a while, but they had no idea that the greatest difficulties and dangers were yet to come. After returning to her father's house, Amanda began to live with her parents as she had before. The girl decided to start fresh, wanting to forget about the unhealthy relationship and erase the painful period and James from her memories. She found a new job in a restaurant, this time as a waitress. It was the same establishment where many of the local residents went, and Amanda knew many of them well. She began to communicate with the residents of Delta again, meeting new people and making friends. Amanda was a very extroverted girl and was always willing to make contact, so she quickly became loved by all the visitors to the establishment. Things were going well. Gradually, the bitterness of past grievances passed. She earned enough for her age and could provide for her son, so she began to look for an apartment to rent and move out of her parents' house. They got along well, but the space was clearly not enough to start a family. While working in the restaurant, she met a young man named Curtis, whom she had often crossed paths with back in school, though they had hardly communicated at the time. Amanda began talking to him and realized that he was a very pleasant young man. A rapprochement began between them, and the girl helped him in many ways. This grew into a feeling of mutual affection, with the guy warmly accepting her son from the previous relationship. He repeatedly said that he treated him like family. On March 13, 2017, the heroine of the story decided to officially announce her relationship with this young man, not knowing how this would turn out. On her social media pages, Amanda changed her status from single to in a relationship. Amanda immediately indicated that she was in a serious relationship with Curtis the same day he moved in with her. Now, they lived as a family with the baby, the heroine's father, and stepmother. The young lovers planned to start renting an apartment soon, aiming to become a full-fledged couple and build a family. On Tuesday, March 14, 2017, Curtis got up very early. He left for work before 5 a.m., and the only adults left in the house were Amanda, who was still sleeping, and her stepmother, Deborah. The baby, now 10 months old, was peacefully sleeping in his crib. Around 6 a.m., Deborah heard a loud bang that woke her up. She barely opened her eyes and didn't immediately understand what had happened. It sounded like a gunshot or something large being dropped. Alarmed, Deborah decided to check what was going on. She called Amanda's name but heard only a suspicious noise in response. Footsteps echoed, growing louder as someone quickly approached her room. Realizing that this could be an intruder, Deborah locked the bedroom door and stood near it to protect herself. Without hesitation, the intruder shot at the lock, injuring Deborah. The bullet passed through her thumb, but she miraculously wasn't seriously hurt. The assailant, still determined, kicked in the door and entered the bedroom. It was a man in a mask, holding a weapon. He was visibly agitated and constantly looked around as if expecting someone to attack him. He demanded to know where Curtis was. Deborah, still in shock, explained that he had already left for work and they had missed each other by about half an hour. The man became angry, declaring that he had come to kill Amanda and would not hesitate to kill anyone who tried to stop him. He forced Deborah to take her mobile phone and demanded the child. Despite her objections, Deborah had no choice but to obey. She took the baby from the crib but refused to hand him over to the man, saying she would accompany him instead. She also gave the man Amanda's phone as he demanded. The intruder then pointed the gun at the back of Deborah's head and forced her to leave the house without even allowing her to change clothes. She was wearing only pajamas in the cold morning. He shoved her into the car, and once they were in the vehicle, removed his mask. Deborah recognized the man immediately. It was James. James explained that he needed an escort and planned to escape the city with the baby, using Deborah as a hostage. He demanded that she show him the safest route to avoid police patrols. After driving a few hundred meters from the house, he ordered Deborah to call an ambulance, claiming Amanda had been wounded and could still be saved. Deborah, terrified, contacted 911 and briefly explained the situation, giving her address. As soon as the dispatcher asked for more details, James took the phone from her. Meanwhile, the police were already on their way. Patrol officers arrived within minutes and quickly noticed that the front door was ajar. They entered the house and one officer heard an alarm from Amanda's room. When they arrived at the scene, they found Amanda lying on her bed, bloody, but still alive. At first, the officers thought it was a suicide attempt, as they couldn't find the weapon. They asked Amanda where the gun was, but she was disoriented and didn't know. When they inquired about her son, they found that the crib was empty. Amanda managed to whisper that James had taken the baby before losing consciousness. The officers immediately rushed to get medical help and Amanda was taken to the hospital. Tragically, 20 minutes later, she passed away from a gunshot wound to the chest that proved to be fatal. Meanwhile, Curtis and Amanda's father were at work, unaware of what was happening at home. Deborah was still being held hostage, and it was unclear to the police what had transpired. However, it was soon confirmed that Deborah and the child were likely in the hands of the attacker. The authorities issued an alert for the armed criminal on the run with hostages. James had fled the area, taking Deborah and the baby with him. He was headed toward the airport and needed Deborah to help him get there. At one point, they encountered a railway crossing, but when James saw that a train was approaching, he panicked and pressed the accelerator. In the process, he crashed into the crossing gates, damaging the car. Despite this, he continued driving, but the car was severely damaged and could not move further. Realizing he was stuck, James called a friend for help. A van soon arrived with a woman and 2 children inside. James, Deborah, and the baby got into the van, and they were driven to an unknown location where James's friend lived. There, James continued to act erratically, pacing around the room with the gun in his hand. Eventually, he decided to steal his friend's car and continue his flight. Deborah managed to ask to use the bathroom, and when she was left alone, she tried to escape through the window, but failed. Shortly after, the woman who had driven them away returned with the children and decided to leave the house, fearing the situation was becoming too dangerous. James, however, grew increasingly paranoid. He didn't trust anyone and believed that his friend might contact the police. After a stop at a gas station to buy a new lighter, James became even more agitated. He warned Deborah not to do anything stupid or he would shoot her. He was captured on the station's CCTV cameras for the first time. As the news of the kidnapping spread, an emergency alert was issued to local residents. Authorities confirmed that Amanda had died from her injuries, and the public was warned about the abduction. James, still unsettled by Amanda's death, was visibly upset, but he didn't open fire on anyone. Instead, he seemed to be contemplating his next move. He confessed that he only had 5 bullets left, 1 for the baby, 1 for Deborah, and 3 for the police. He planned to use the remaining bullet for himself if things went wrong. The situation had become dire, and Deborah was terrified for her life and the baby's. As police tracked James's movements, he continued to drive aggressively. Deborah, feeling the mounting danger, tried to get closer to the baby to shield him from potential gunfire. James, however, wouldn't let her. At one point, he stopped the car, took the baby in his arms, and placed him on his lap. In a dramatic turn, police managed to surround the vehicle in Fulton County, Indiana. Despite his earlier threats, James surrendered peacefully. He handed the baby over to the police and was arrested without further incident. The ordeal was finally over for Deborah and the baby, though she was too overwhelmed to process her relief and fainted in the aftermath. James was later convicted of the crimes and sentenced to life imprisonment with the possibility of parole after 27 years. During the investigation, it was revealed that his actions had been driven by jealousy. Upon learning that Amanda was in a new relationship, he had snapped. He armed himself and went to her father's house with the intention of killing her. Since Curtis was no longer there, he shot Amanda instead. Deborah, who had helped save the baby, was left forever indebted to Amanda for the courage she showed in the face of danger. She took on the responsibility of raising the boy. Though the loss of Amanda was deeply mourned, her death ultimately led to the saving of at least 2 innocent lives. Thank you for watching.